Welcome back to another YouTube video by the FPL Draft Duo. We are a duo who are dedicated to the FPL Draft Mode and we want to bring it to a wider audience. Listen in to our weekly podcast where we help people with waiver suggestions, trade dilemmas and gives tips and tricks to win at the draft.
Do make sure to follow us on TikTok, Instagram and most importantly Twitter for those last minute waiver suggestions and injury updates.
It's important to know the Christmas waiver deadlines. Game Week 18's deadline is Wednesday at 6:30, followed by Game Week 19 at 11 o'clock on Monday. It's a very quick turnaround and they won't have much time, so make sure you're keeping up to date with the podcast and YouTube to make sure you get the best waivers possible. Game Week 20 shortly after that, just before New Year's, and then there's a 2 or 3 week break before Game Week 21, which is 11 AM Friday. If you haven't done it before, a 19 game week season is a great way to redraft. It gives you another opportunity to pick another selection of players with a lot of new additions to the leagues in the transfer window.
Our last week's waiver of the week was Richarlison. So Richarlison returned with a goal, a clean sheet and also 1 bonus point.
And our punt of the week was Patterson, who started right back because of injuries in the Everton squad. He also got a clean sheet and picked up 1 bonus point for his efforts.
Numerous players did return in Game Week 17 that may have been flagged on fantasy football. So Eze played 1 minute, Botman played 6, Dean Henderson played the full 90 and Foster played 45. This is where keeping up to date with us on Twitter comes in very handy because we give those last minute waiver suggestions that can have drastic returns in your draft.
On to our Game Week 18 waiver suggestions. There has been a lot of change in the goalkeeping position over the last couple of weeks and this continued in Game Week 17. Bentley started for Wolves again as Jose Sa missed another game week. We do expect Jose Sa to come back in Game Week 18, so if you have Bentley, he's probably a drop. Jason Steele and Verbruggen have been rotated constantly throughout the season, as have Turner and Vlachodimos. Turner was at fault for one of the goals of the weekend, so this might be a catalyst for Vlachodimos getting back his spot. We saw Fabianski start his 3rd game in a row and West Ham keep a rare clean sheet. Looking at all these keepers, a possibility for the draft is a double up. Although many of these keepers aren't very exciting, because of the rotation that has happened this year, doubling up with 2 keepers from the same team might be a solid way to ensure some points for your team. Because of the volume of rotation this year, there is likely times where you will have no playing goalkeeper, but taking 2 keepers from the same team ensures that you have at least 1 playing goalkeeper. Although it may be 2 or 3 points, it may have a big effect on the outcome of your game that week.
Another goalkeeper suggestion is Petrovic. So this comes off the back of Sanchez's injury. Now a quote from Pochettino said, "Of course, I am very sad because we're going to lose a player maybe for a few weeks. We still need to wait and see perfectly the situation with Robert." So this gives an indication that Petrovic, although he may have been a 1 week punt for that Sheffield game, he now looks like a hold and a nailed goalkeeper over the next couple of game weeks. Chelsea are still top of the fixture ticker, so you would hope to expect that Chelsea will keep some clean sheets over the next 6 to 7 game weeks.
Another short-term keeper option is Dean Henderson. Johnson is out with a calf injury and he has an unknown return date. Henderson started and played 90 minutes at the weekend, and although Crystal Palace don't have great fixtures defensively, you can't underestimate the value of a playing keeper. As we said, those 2 or 3 points could be vital in winning that game week. Over the next 6 or 7 game weeks, you might expect 1, maybe 2 clean sheets, but you will heavily rely on save points.
Onto our defender waiver suggestions in large size leagues. So first up is Wan-Bissaka. So Wan-Bissaka most likely will come into the team because of Dallow's suspension. Dallow received a 2nd yellow card in injury time against Liverpool, a game where United actually kept a clean sheet. United have 6 clean sheets so far this season, just 1 behind Arsenal. So if you did want to take a punt on Wan-Bissaka this week, they do play West Ham away.
There are still some very good options that we have mentioned in previous YouTube videos that are still good options for Game Week 18 and beyond. Bassi has a very good run of fixtures for Fulham, which we'll talk about later on. Moreno returned last week and is a hold to see does he get more time in that Villa side, and then Bournemouth boys are a hold for the next 2 game weeks. As we previously mentioned and mentioned on our podcast, we're coming to a stage of the season where the waivers are whittling down. But come January, we will have a lot more options going forward that may be good additions to your squad.
Next up are our Fulham boys. So the two fullbacks for Fulham are great picks over the next 7 game weeks. Robinson has 5 returns in the last 6 game weeks with 3 assists and 2 clean sheets. Castagna has actually started 12 of the last 14 game weeks, so where he may have gone under the radar in that Fulham side, he is a nailed player. And over the next couple of game weeks they play Burnley, Bournemouth. They do have 2 tough fixtures in Arsenal, Chelsea, but game weeks 22, 23 and 24 they play Everton, Burnley and Bournemouth. If I was to rank these, I would rank Robinson number 1 and Castagna number 2, but if you did pick up either of these, you would be looking to hold them for the next 7 game weeks, possibly benching them for Arsenal and Chelsea.
In smaller size leagues, we have 2 massive additions to the waivers. Dan Burn and Botman recently came back from injury. Dan Burn played in the Champions League during the week and then started at the weekend. As we said, it's important to keep up to date on Twitter as we talked about Dan Burn later on this week. Both of these players are great pickups in the draft, if they're not already drafted. If you picked up one of these players, you would be likely to hold them for the season. We'd probably put Dan Burn higher than Botman as he gets fairly advanced up the pitch, but both of them have very good aerial threat in that Newcastle side. As previously mentioned, Newcastle are a formidable side at home and are very likely to keep a clean sheet. They have also the joint best defence in the league, level with Arsenal with 7 clean sheets.
Added to our watch list is Robertson. So taking this quote into consideration, you might expect Robertson to be back by the 1st of January, where previously insinuated the 21st on Fantasy Football. So if you picked Robertson up now, you could hold him on your bench for game weeks 18 and 19, with the possibility then of him making the bench for the Newcastle fixture and then starting in game week 21 for their away fixture to Bournemouth.
On to our midfield waiver suggestions. So a lot of the players that we have previously said on our YouTube and podcast are still very relevant. We're going to talk about a couple of them in detail, but the likes of Bruno Guimaraes, Bailey, Longstaff and Andres Pereira are all great options going forward. If you want more details on why these are very good picks, have a look back at the Game Week 17 YouTube video. We also talk about some of these players in depth on our podcast, the likes of Mudryk, Eze, Grealish and Gross, among many others, to give you a better understanding of where you might rank these players. But looking at Eze and Olise specifically, both of these are very good picks going forward. They both have experienced injuries this season, but when they're both playing together, Crystal Palace can score against most teams. Although they might have hard fixtures on paper, a lot of these teams are vulnerable. Brighton are very poor at the back, Chelsea have been dodgy, Brentford have a lot of injuries. Excluding that Arsenal game, they then go on to Sheffield, Brighton, Chelsea again, Everton and Burnley. So if you pick 1 or 2 of these up, you could hold them for the next 10-12 game weeks, if not the full season. They have rotated for penalty duties, but both of them take free kicks, Eze usually from the left and Olise from the right. So there's many different routes to points for these 2 players.
Next up is Willian. Now although Willian didn't feature in Game Week 17 due to injury, he may have gone under the radar in a lot of leagues. Fulham has some great fixtures over the next 7. They play Burnley, Bournemouth, Arsenal, Chelsea away, which is a great fixture, but on paper it may seem harder than it actually is, as Chelsea have conceded this year. After that, they have Everton, Burnley and Bournemouth. To note about Willian, he is on penalties, and Fulham have racked up some great returns over the last couple of game weeks. So if Willian still is on your waiver, he will be a great pickup over the next 7 game weeks.
Top of our midfielder waiver suggestions this week is Jacob Ramsey. Jacob Ramsey started against Brentford and racked up some decent stats with a 0.44 expected goal involvements, 4 key passes and 1 big chance missed. Villa are scoring a lot of goals, but they also have a lot of rotation in that team. Tielemans had an injury and didn't start the last day, but Kamara is suspended. So we do expect Ramsey to start in 2 or 3 of the next games, and how he performs in those games will dictate how good of a pick he will be in the long term. But in the short term, Ramsey is going to be a nice way into that Villa side. Unlike other weeks, we have a good few forward waiver suggestions. Starting off with Fulham's Munez, who is likely to start in game week 18 because of Raul Jimenez's red card. He has been out injured for the past couple of game weeks, played against Manchester United in his previous game and played very well. Do expect him to get the nod over Vinicius, and he could be okay for your team if you need a playing striker over the next couple of game weeks. Mateta has silenced us here in the Draft Duo podcast. Last week we said that he is a good option if you need a playing striker, and he actually returned with a 12-pointer. As we previously said, Palace do have some good attacking fixtures, although they may seem harder on paper. He still isn't the most exciting of picks, but if Olise and Eze start playing well, he's bound to get some returns in the meantime. Top of our waiver suggestions in larger size leagues for forwards is Lyle Foster. He returned from injury in game week 17, and if you use him as a rotating striker over the next 6 game weeks, he could be very fruitful. See how he gets on against Fulham, and if he continues to play the majority of games, you can easily bench him for Liverpool and Villa and play him for Luton. If he does fail to get back into that Burnley side, you are likely going to bench him for Liverpool and Villa anyways, so you can take a free punt on Foster and monitor his minutes over the next couple of game weeks. If it goes well, you have a striker that you can happily play in 3 out of the next 6 game weeks. On to our forward suggestions in smaller size leagues. 2 players that are joined the watch list are Wilson and DCL. Wilson joins the watch list as he has racked up 7 goals and 1 assist with very little minutes played this year. Although he can be a very frustrating player to own, with Isaac's consistent groin injury, he may get more minutes than expected over the next couple of game weeks. He doesn't need much time on the pitch to return, and when he is on the pitch, he's on penalties. Another player that might have gone under the radar is DCL. For the first time in a long time, DCL has put together a nice run of fixtures. He has started the last 10 out of 11 games for Everton, and Everton are flying. The way they play with McNeil and Harrison on the wings, DCL is likely to get a lot of ball and has been unlucky not to return in the last couple of game weeks. If you can get a cheeky little trade for DCL over the line, I think he could be slightly undervalued currently.
Thank you very much for listening. We appreciate every listen, every like, every subscribe. And if you have any questions as well, drop it in the comments and we'll be able to give you any tips, tricks or any waiver suggestions as well as they come up later on in the week. If you're not following us on Instagram, Twitter or TikTok, do check us out. But until next time, FPL Draft Duo out.